Okay, so for today we are sort of doing this flipped. I'm going to be recording, or re-recording, I guess I should say, putting together the rig for the Maya 5 animation cinematography assignment that involves using this very, very basic rig that I've put together for you guys. Before I get into this, though, I figure I want to show you folks where we're headed. So where does this road lead to? Oh, I'm gonna stop my video just because it lags my system really bad right now. I need to restart my computer. It's very slow, but this has been what I had to do all day. So there we go. So a professional quality rig. We're gonna start working with Henry and Caroline relatively soon. Henry and Caroline are our basic male and female rigs. These are from our homies at Cogswell College, so shouts out to them. And you can see it's got like pockets on his pants, got some wrinkles in the knee, got some wrinkles in the shirt and stuff. So he's got some fine detail on here. So this is, like I said, a professional quality rig. So all of these little boxes and controls around the geometry are what actually controls the animation. So you don't actually move. I don't click on Henry's geometry. These controls are bound to the geometry, and then affecting the controls will allow you to animate. So just taking a look at the foot, and again, this is just for your info. So if this is just like, you're like, I'm not really sure what's going on here, or I'm not ready for that kind of stuff yet, Mr. Meyer, just hold on tight. You know, if this is purely for your info, this is where we're headed. So I'm moving the foot around, and you can see as I move the foot, the knee starts bending. And where the knee is pointed is wherever this ball, called a pole vector, is pointed. So that helps me direct the foot, or excuse me, the knee, as I move the foot. So how the legs work is a system that we call inverse kinematics. Oh, no! I thank you for catching me. I've luckily not done this as many times as I would do it in my classroom, which I would frequently forget that I turned off the Apple TV. Thank you. I'll just level with you guys. I am pretty frazzled right now. I thought I slept well, but I still feel kind of tired, and I totally whiffed it this morning in my animation class, so not in the highest spirits. So I'm making some pretty dumb mistakes. Okay. Let's reset this bad boy. Okay. So, this is Henry. Henry is our default male rig that we're going to work with this year, courtesy of our homies at Cogswell. So, these controls around the geometry are what we work with. So, what I was talking about is, as you move the foot, so if I move the foot out and out, you can see that the knee bends. And now, where the knee is pointed is based on this pole vector, is what it's called. So wherever you have the pole vector at is where the knee is going to be pointed. Now, the system of how this works is what we call inverse kinematics, which I was just talking about. So it's based on the location of the hip and how the foot is moving in relation to the hip. So imagine a big bungee cord being strapped between the hip and the ankle, and that is how, as that triangle gets compressed, it is changing, you know, the angle. It's creating like a triangle here. So, and then this controls which direction in 3D that triangle is pointed. So again, that's called IK. Now again, this is all stuff that's going to come up later. This is purely for your info. So the arm, on the other hand, is what we call an FK system, forward kinematics. So instead of working our way up from the foot to the hip, we're working ourselves away from the body. So In this case, who in here has broken their collarbone, by the way? You can either just raise your hand on the cam or say yes in the chat. Who's broken their collarbone? No one. Wow, this is the first year I've had no one in any of my classes that's broken their collarbone. Okay, so for those of you who are unfamiliar with what I'm talking about, the collarbone is that bone that's just beneath your neck, on the left and right side of your neck, and then like just the top of your chest. That bone allows you to move the socket joint forward and back, so move your shoulder forward and back. So that is an important part of how this rig works. So I would rotate the arm forward in the socket, or I'd rotate the socket forward, then I rotate the socket up, spin his arm around, right? Then I can grab this here. Now here's where I would point out you cannot move your elbow in 3 dimensions. Now on the gimbal you can still edit all 3 dimensions, but you should not. You'll notice in the channel box that only rotate Y is visible. Your elbow only moves in the one direction unless it's broken. So you only want to use the Y axis when you're editing the elbow. And so now he's sort of waving at us. And then if you want to twist the elbow, you actually, if you notice, if you twist at your wrist and it twists your forearm down to your elbow. So now I could do this and this, and now he's saluting us. Oh, and then here I'm going to rotate this forward. Blam. Salute. So this is how a real rig works. Now we're going to get into this relatively soon. I don't think this is too above your pay grade at this point. I mean, obviously using it like a master, it's way above your pay grade. But you know, actually going in here and like it's just rotating these objects, and they are objects. They're just bound to the mesh of Henry. So if anyone wants to ask me how to rig, don't, because I won't teach you. I don't like doing it, and it's very difficult and time consuming, and frankly, if you want to be a rigger, you can learn that in college. I teach an animation class, and I'm not saying that just to be like rude. It's just like you can see how detailed and complicated this thing is. Rigging is not an easy process. It's very difficult. So that is for something to explore when you're ready to move into sort of a professional state. So for us as beginners, we are going to use rigs that have been made for us all year, which is unfortunate because it is kind of, reduces some of your creativity, but it is sort of the way it is when it comes to 3D. And that's why departments are so segmented in studios and such. It's like you can't expect a person who knows how to rig to be able to animate like a master when you have to spend so much time knowing how to put together the rig, right? You would expect everyone to be focused on their disciplines. So that's my side tangent about rigs, where we're going, the path ahead. So let's go open up our training wheels rig. Whoops, I clicked the wrong file. Hold on. I did it again. I'm gonna snap. There we go. Okay, training wheels rig. So for us, we are going to create our own sort of fake scuffed training wheels rig using what we learned on Maya 4, using groups and pivot points, and with a little assistance from Maya 5, which we'll be covering very soon. So talking about different viewer modes and different viewer functions in the viewport. So basically, we're going to skip this for right now. This will be more relevant when we get into the wagon. But essentially, these numbers on your keypad, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, will be helpful today, which I'll get into in a second. Mainly this wireframe mode and shaded mode. So that's about where we're at. On Henry, he's in textured mode because Henry has textures. So Henry is in mode 6. Again, all of this I'm going to come back to in a second. And then we got some other things in here. So, going back to our rig. What we have here is a bunch of different objects. that I placed properly, but they're not connected to one another. Okay, so what we're doing is putting the connections in. Now, I am going to build my hierarchy of groups starting from my foot and working towards my hip. And then you will also notice I only did one side of the body, which is good for you because once you set up the rig system on one side of the body, you can just duplicate it over to the other side of the body. Pretty straightforward. So, first things first, this object is my foot. If I'm going to pivot my foot, it's probably going to be moving around the ankle. So if I go back to my Maya 5 tools, one way that I could quickly see, and I'm going to do this a couple of different ways over the next couple of steps. One of the ways that I could quickly see the vertices that are inside of an object is to switch out of what we are in our default mode, which is shaded mode, and switch into wireframe mode, which you do by pressing the 4 key on the keyboard. Not on the number pad. I don't think the number pad works. So if I press 4, you'll see that I can now see inside of everything. And again, 5 brings back your shading view. So I want to move this pivot point to the base of the ankle here. So that way when I pivot my foot, it's rotating around the ankle. So I'm going to hold D as in David for edit my pivot point. V as in vertex for snap to vertex. Grab the center here and snap it to the base of the ankle. And I'll press 5 to go back to my shaded view. And now I'm all good. Bingo. All right. So that's the foot. Your foot connects at the ankle to the calf and knee. So for this object, we want to put these in a group and then make sure that this group also has the pivot point essentially where this one is, because I didn't edit this pivot point. So first thing, I'm going to select this, hold shift and click this object, and we're going to group it. Now the pivot point, typically you folks are used to it being on the origin. Well, everything that is on this object is actually in a group that I moved off the origin, because I imagine that you'll probably start making some stuff in this scene next week, and I didn't want it to just appear underneath your model. So anyway, the pivot point is over here. It doesn't really matter where the pivot point is because we're going to move it ourselves. Excuse me. So our pivot point. Let's check out another method from our Maya 5 notes. So we used wireframe mode and shaded mode. Again, this stuff, we'll get to this next. We'll get to this another time. It's not relevant today. But this stuff down here, so different ways that you can use some things in the viewer. And I've shown a couple of these, but I haven't mentioned what they are. So this one I know I've shown. Isolate select. So our panels menu, I'm just going to, I don't think it's relevant right now. I'll cover this when I get on the notes. So let's do the X-ray. So X-ray allows you to see through meshes. Pretty handy for what we're doing. So those buttons are viewer buttons. So this area that I'm in where we work is called the viewport. So this is where you see the 3D space basically. So, and you'll notice if I press spacebar, each of the cameras has their own viewport settings that you can tweak. In fact, you can see I accidentally left the side view in wireframe mode from when I was editing it earlier. Whoops. Whatever. So anyway, I'm going to go back into perspective. Now, one of these buttons towards the middle of the screen, if you have it full screen, but towards the end of all of the buttons that are in the viewer bar here, I'm going to toggle this one, which looks like a Venn diagram of squares, called X-ray. And so now it's quasi-transparent. And so if I want to reselect a group as a reminder from our Maya 4 notes, you select an object in the group and hit the up arrow. So now I have this group that I had made. And I want to take that group and put its pivot point on the bottom of the tibia. Pretty sure that's the right bone. No, femur. I'm dumb. I was thinking of my arms. Sorry, it's been a while since I had to name bones in my college days. So snapping this, snapping this pivot point. First, I'm just going to snap it up over here and then just zoom in so I can get closer. And then get a decent angle. Yeah, bingo. So now, this group that includes the foot will now bend around the base of the femur. And also, if I grab the foot can bend independently too. And I'll turn off my X-ray so you can see that a little better. Right? So we're good there. The next group. So I just need to add my thigh and hip. Again, we'll just group this again. And same thing, the pivot point will get set to down here. Now, one thing that is problematic with this is that there's nothing to actually snap this pivot point to on the hip. So how are we going to fix this to get it into the center of this sphere, which is where we want it to pivot around? So how do I get it in there? So I'm going to go into my side view. And I'm going to take advantage of, I'm going to put this on shaded. And then I'm going to, so that was 5 to reactivate shaded mode. And then another thing that is in our Maya 5 notes is wireframe on shaded. So I'm just trying to demonstrate all of these things where I can. So wireframe on shaded shows your wireframe over whatever your shading mode is. So basically, if it's on 4, you won't notice any difference. If it's on 5 or 6, though, you'll notice that your wireframe is visible over either the gray shading or textures. So, my pivot point, like I said, because I made a new group, is down here. So I'm just going to hold DV, snap my pivot point way up here, and then zoom in. So I want it to be on the center and the wow. Okay, cool. I got it right in the exact spot here. So on my y-axis and my z-axis, because I'm in my side view, which is actually my front view, but, you know. So I have this placed correctly in the y and the z-axis. Now if I go over into my x-axis, it's going to be difficult to see what I'm doing. So this is a good time, again, for me to press 4 to see through my objects. And this time when I hold D and V, instead of grabbing the center of the pivot, I'm just going to hit the X, or the red arrow, and push it back on the X-axis. And now, if I let go, I'll press 5 here, go back in here. You'll see that in the 3D space, it has now been moved into the center of the volume without there being a vertex there for me to snap it to. So that's how you sort of cheat and get around some of Maya's more difficult things, like snapping these pivot points to things that don't have verts to snap them to easily. So that leaves us with a leg that can pivot around the hip. And if I click the knee and hit the up arrow, when I bend the knee, when I grab the foot, right? So far, so good. Alright, so I got one leg done. Now, what I'm going to want to do is I'm going to duplicate my leg. And again, I have it selected as, so let me undo this. So let me undo my duplicate. So I have the group selected that I just staggered all of the things properly with their group selections. So I want to make sure I'm selected in group mode. You don't want to grab it like this. Note, you want to grab the thigh and hit the up arrow. Make sure you're on the whole thigh and below group. Then duplicate that. Group that, and you'll notice that the pivot point goes to the axis of symmetry for this object, essentially. Long story short. So, and we notice our directional axis for Z is going this direction. So that means if I invert this group from scale Z1 to scale Z-1, now this rig if I hit the up arrow, is all good. Now we have 2. So then I could click this thigh. Yes, you can. And I will be uploading this video also too if you don't think you're able to follow along right now. But yes. So I'm going to hit, I have these both selected. I'm going to hit the up arrow. Now I have both of those groups selected for both sides of the body. And then I'm going to grab the pelvis and I'm going to group those together. So now, whoops, so let me up arrow. So now, when I pivot the legs, they'll all pivot together. Now I don't want my pivot point down here. I want it up here. And that's because I want to be able to rotate the body from the hip too. So here is a great time for me to go into X-ray again, so I can see that. And if I'm in X-ray with my wireframe on shaded, then I can see in there. And wireframe on shaded is this one with the lines are on the outside of the colored cube. It's directly under SVG if you have it full screened. It looks like this icon here. Okay, so now move tool, D and V is for edit pivot, and snap to vertex and snap it to the base of the spine that I put there. And so now, let me turn this off. Just like before, so I can pivot here, I can also pivot here. All right. The spine, you actually don't need to worry about this. This is sort of just connecting these because this is the one that you're going to worry about. Okay, so for this, for the chest, we don't really need to worry about it because we're going to move the chest together with the arms. So we need to set up our arm rig, duplicate it over, and then the group that contains the arms and the chest will have their pivot point moved. So we'll just move directly to the hand. The hand, unlike the foot, you don't need to do anything with it. The hand is just a sphere. It's not meant to be moved. So this, again, we'll just group it. Move tool, you'll see the pivot points down here. I'm going to grab my pivot point and bring it up here. Zoom in. I'm going to hit 4. D and V for snap to vertex and move pivot. Get it to the center there. Hit 5 to bring back my shaded view. Alright, so same thing. I'm going to add this to my selection, create a new group for this whole arm. Move tool again. D and V for edit, pivot, snap it up here. And so we want to get it to here. So I need to snap this over 1. And then I'm going to move it back in space. So if I go here and up here, again holding D and V, and just move it back using the red X arrow. So it's snapping to this vertice in space, but it is not moving it to that vertice by dragging on the arrow here. So that way when I come back in here, it's in the center of the volume. So that's how that works, by the way. So now we're all good. So same thing, I'm going to select, make sure I have the entire arm in the group. So I hit the up arrow again. New group for all of that. And then this group you will duplicate. And that one gets scale -1Z too. So now you have 2 arms and 2 legs. So I'll grab this, up arrow, grab this, group it with the torso. So the torso, I want to move my pivot point. I'll just snap it up here. And I'll put my X-ray back on. I'm going to snap it to right there. So let's hold D and V. Snap it to that spine point. And so now, if I turn my X-ray off, you also want to add the head and neck. Forgot about that. So let me undo. I also want to add head and neck. So this is where I would say if you want to move your head from your file onto this, stay tuned for that, because I'm going to show that probably on Monday, or I'll show you after this if you're working on it now, but it's not going to be in the video right now. So all of this I'm just going to group together, and then so same thing I just did. So pivot point, set this to X-ray. I just forgot to add two things. So then we'll put this in here, and we will turn X-ray off, and then you can see whoops, get the group, hit the up arrow again to select the groups when you're selected on an object, and then this person's starts Naruto running. So the last thing to do is the head. You need to move the pivot point for the head, not to the center of the head, but I'll hit 4 for wireframe mode, but to the base of the neck. So I'm going to go ahead and hit my move tool, DV, snap it there. I get the right one? Yes, I did get it. Okay, very good. Hit 5. And so Naruto running. Get my film gate. Oops. My own shinobi way. Okay. So that is how you set up the rig. So, except without me doing all the bending. So let me... Should end up with something along these lines, with all of this connected. So that is portion 1.